Hey everyone, Sheldon here, and this is part 3 of the Paper Dual Extended Hidden Blade tutorial, so make sure you guys click on the link in the description to find all of the blueprints. Alright, so now we're going to start making the slider and the sliding components. Okay, so I'm just going to take this slider template and just glue it to this 16 layer piece. After it's glued on, you can just cut it out. Alright, there it is. And I can put the slider in here and you guys can see how it functions. So if I move it back and forth, you can see it moves the locks out of the way. You can see the lock prevents the blade from moving forward, so if I try to move it, it won't move forward. That lock needs to be moved out of the way. So the slider just pushes the lock out of the way when it goes forward, which then allows the blade to move forward like that. And then when the blade moves forward, it gets locked in position by that lock and it can't go back. And then when you pull the slider back, it moves that lock out of the way, which then allows the blade to go back inside, just like that. Now, I'm just going to cut these two shapes out right here, because those are going to form the sliding components. After you cut them out, they should look like this. So nothing's changed about them. They're just separate from the slider now. And I'm going to use these to form the sliding components. So it's pretty simple. Basically, I have 3 16-layer pieces right here. All of these need to be 2.3 inches long, so this direction, and they need to be 0.140 wide, like that. So I'm just going to glue them together with some super glue. After gluing it together, this is what it looks like, and I also went ahead and trimmed off the excess, so it's exactly 2.3 inches long. I'm also peeling off just a couple layers to make it the right height, which is about 0.160. I'm just going to measure and see. Oh yeah, look at that. It's basically spot on. Now I'm just filing the sides down until they're nice and smooth. Alright, so that's what it looks like after sanding the edges and filing them. So it looks better than it did before. Now I'm just going to check and see if it fits in this long channel. I'm just going to take the slider out and take this piece and put it in here in the long channel. So you can see it fits in there, but it's not necessarily perfect, smooth movement. And that's fine for right now, but obviously later on we're going to have to polish this piece so it's nice and smooth. The next thing we're going to do is cut out a little piece right here, but it's not going to go all the way down. It's going to be kind of like an L shape. And you can see I already have a line drawn on there. So if you measure in from this outside edge, it should be 0.320. So just like that. You can see here on the dial, it's 0.320. So just measure in and draw a line on there. Now I'm just going to start cutting down and through these layers and just basically peel off layers as I go until I reach this line right there. And I'm just going to keep cutting until this piece right there is left, and that should be about 0.070, which is a 16-layer piece left. Just to specify, you have the overall thickness, which is 0.160, so that's the whole thing, and then you have this little piece right there that's left over, and that's going to be 0.070. So if you really want to, you can just take another 16 layer piece and use that kind of as a gauge. All right, here we go. Alright, so I finished doing that, as you can see. So I have this leftover piece, and I drew a cross on there. So I'm just going to drill a hole straight through the center of that cross using a 1/16 inch drill. So it's just going to go straight through the center right there. That's what it looks like after drilling the hole, as you can see. So now I have this small wire here that I wrapped a very small band of paper around. And that's just going to go inside this hole, just like this. Basically, I just have to make the top of that flush with the top of this. So it should be flat going across like that. I'm just gluing it in place. Now I'm just going to trim the excess off. Now I'm just filing the excess off, just like this. After that, it should look something like this. So now I can just take this piece and glue it on here, just like that. This is going to be the bottom sliding component, so you just line it up with that corner right there and just glue it on. Okay, that's what it looks like after it's glued on there. So it's pretty simple. Just make sure you match the corner up the best you can. It just creates less work for later. And I went ahead and made the other side right here. So it's the exact same thing. It's just a mirrored image of this one. You can see they both fit in the long channel where they're supposed to go, like that. And I can also put the slider in here, and it fits sort of like a puzzle where it used to fit, because these were originally part of the slider, but now they're separate components entirely. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is glue these small pieces onto the bottom of the sliding components. So they're 0.190 by 0.107. Just one thing to keep in mind, you should be able to take one of these pieces and lay them in here, and it shouldn't have any friction, so it should be able to move just like that. So I'm just going to take these pieces and glue them to the bottom of the sliding component where it needs to go. So I'm just gluing it on there like this. Alright, there you go. So that's what they look like when they're both glued on there. And I'd say it looks pretty good. So as you guys know, the blade has a little cutout right there and then a long cutout right here. And the rectangular pieces on the bottom of the sliding component that we just glued on, basically they just fit inside those areas, just like that. So same thing for this one right here. It's a longer cutout, but that's necessary in order for it to hook on right there. So I'm just going to put it together so you can see how it works. So the blade goes in like that. Now I'm just using a small rubber band to attach the sliding components together. So that's how they're going to pull toward each other all the time. And that little rectangular piece is going to hook into that small cutout. But the whole thing fits inside the long channel like this. So that's hooked onto that cutout now. I can pull this forward and put the slider in here like that. And now if I push the slider forward, it works just like that, and it also retracts. So it's a pretty smooth action already. And the reason this works in the first place is pretty simple. I'm just going to take this out. So you can see those constantly want to move toward each other like that. And it's hooked onto that rectangular piece, as you guys saw earlier. So basically, if this gets pulled forward like that, and I just move this lock out of the way, move it over here. So if I move that lock out of the way, the whole thing can go forward just like that. And now this lock is keeping it in the external position, and also this rectangular piece on the bottom of the sliding component hooks on right there in that long cutout. So I'll just put that there. And if I build up tension and pull the whole thing back like this and move this lock out of the way, the whole thing retracts. And basically the slider just does the work for you. All you have to do is just push it back and forth. So it keeps it a certain distance apart, which makes the rubber band constantly under tension. And the slope surface on the slider moves the lock out of the way. So I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see the slider constantly wants to go back to its original position because it's keeping tension with those sliding components. So basically it builds up tension when this moves forward, and then it reaches a point where the slider just unlocks the lock and the whole thing can go forward. Same thing for the retraction. So the slider constantly wants to move back to its original position because of that spring tension, and the sliding component can't move back because it's hooked onto that small cutout in there with that rectangular piece on the bottom of it. So if I build up tension, it'll just keep pulling until it unlocks that lock because the slider has that sloped surface right there. So just pull it back and it retracts inside. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. If it doesn't, I'll have an in-depth explanation video showing how the whole thing works. So that'll give you guys some closure on everything. Alright, so now we're going to make this piece, which is basically a long flat piece which will prevent the internal components of this part of the hidden blade from interfering with the other internal components, which actually makes the dual action part work. It sounds complicated when you put it like that, but it should be pretty simple. This whole piece is going to have some internal moving pieces inside of it, so it's going to have little walls going around the whole thing, which kind of keeps it all in a box shape. Now I'm just going to glue this template layer to this 8-layer piece of hardened paper. Now it's glued on there, as you can see, so I'm just going to cut all around the outside edge and then cut out these two rectangular shapes right there. Those are the only two cutouts in this whole piece. So after cutting it out, it looks like this, and it's 8 layers thick, so it's pretty flimsy, but when we add these walls, it'll strengthen it up. And also it's going to have the support from the pieces that go on top of it, and also the main frame beneath it. So I'm just going to glue these walls on here, just line it up with the line that is on the blueprint layer. So just going to go on there like that. And both of these pieces are 16-layer pieces, and they're 0.130 wide, or tall, I guess I should say. So they're just going to go on there like that. After gluing the walls on there, it should look something like this, and I also went ahead and glued a small piece right there and right there, so it kind of makes it like a box shape minus the top. So those two pieces are both the exact same height as these long walls, which was 0.130. Now I just need to take some layers of paper and glue them over these rounded areas that hold the screws, because they need to be the same height as the walls. So after doing that, it's going to look like this on this side, so you can see the thickness matches the height of the wall. Okay, so that's what it looks like after adding the pieces for the screws, you know, just stacking them up to the same height as the walls. So when I put it over it, all the areas for the screws should line up, as you can see. So obviously I'm going to drill the holes later. Okay, that's the end of part 3, and I'll see you guys in part 4.